I got into massage therapy to heal people, to heal their minds and bodies, to bring peace to their souls. Deshaun Watson has robbed me of that.
22 civil cases filed.
22 lawsuits against Deshaun Watson.
How can you do business with a man that has 22 separate allegations?
This is just the first step in what could be a long and convoluted and drawn-out process.
We want to say that Deshaun Watson is innocent until proven guilty.
I think where we are right now, Skip, everybody deserves the benefit of the doubt.
The guy's had so many private massages over the course of the last 2 years, he can't figure out who the people are.
She was so psychologically and emotionally damaged.
It just gets worse and worse. This can't go away.
So this is our overview of the Deshaun Watson, the allegations on Deshaun Watson. I mean, all of this stuff, this is just information that's available to the public. I think a lot of people in the sports world understand the severity and the gravity of the situation. But at the same time, these are all allegations. We're just going to lay out information, break it down, give our thoughts, cover the what ifs. None of this is necessarily true. I mean, there are things that are informational and factual, but you know, all the allegations are allegations. None of it has yet to be proven true, but we think it's significant enough to the point that we need to kind of go over things and kind of inform people on the situation itself. Deshaun Watson, the man in question, the star quarterback at Clemson, and then gets drafted to the Houston Texans. He signs a massive contract extension in September, which also had a no trade clause on it. And that's important to note, just because a no trade clause means he's not supposed to get traded. No matter how one side or the other feels, it's supposed to be a security blanket for both the player and ownership. So he signs that in September. And then less than 6 months later, in early January, Nick Caserio, a former Patriots executive, is hired as the Houston GM, and it is said that ownership overlooked other options that were presented by Watson, and he was upset by that. And just less than a month later, he requests a trade from the team despite the no trade clause. Houston says they have no interest in moving on, and then days later, they hire David Coley as the head coach despite Deshaun Watson again having other options that he wanted as the hire.
It's also worth mentioning the fact that it is reported that ownership told Deshaun Watson he would be involved in the process of hiring the GM, and that's a part of the bugaboo there. Yeah.
So he's upset that he thinks he's gonna have some say, and ownership goes behind his back twice on major gaps in the organization in both GM and head coach. So there's this dispute now. Watson wants to get traded. Ownership and the team, including David Coley, the new head coach, they want him there. So to try and flesh things out and, trying to find a middle ground, Coley and Watson meet via Zoom. That's important to note. I mean, I know there's the pandemic situation, but still a lot of, organizations are, still kind of going back to normal. They played the whole season together. So, I mean, there's definitely protocols they could have met in person, is what I'm trying to say. But Watson, it was Watson's preference. It was Zoom.
There was also some very awkward introductory press conferences for David Coley in which he was asked about Watson, in which he kind of just shrugged and said, "We want him here, and that's our story."
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So Watson preferred that they met through Zoom. It didn't seem like we weren't there, we don't know, but it doesn't seem like he had a very personal interest in the meeting itself. But they were meant to discuss the trade situation and try and find somewhere where they could agree. But both parties kept to their side. Watson wants out. The team wants him there. And this is the end of February, like I said. And then just 2-3 weeks later, March 16 and 17, a Houston attorney by the name of Tony Busby files 3 separate sexual assault charges. At the time, all 3 were anonymous, but they were
civil cases.
Civil cases with no identities attached that available for the public. But it was claimed that Watson has shown a disturbing pattern of preying on vulnerable women. That's a quote from Busby. in his initial press release. So in response of this, it was around the same day, same time, the Texans respond with, an organizational quote, and they say, "We became aware of a civil lawsuit involving Deshaun Watson through a social media post on Tuesday night." The team said, "This is the first time we heard of the matter, and we hope to learn more soon. We take accusations of this nature that involve anyone within the Houston Texans or organization seriously. We will await further information before making any additional statements on this incident." So I don't know, this is just my personal opinion, a very vague, in case something bad happens, this is us covering our ass. That's what I get out of that.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Deshaun Watson also responds on social media. He didn't come out. I won't give my opinion on that. I feel like if something of this nature comes out about you, you would want to take to the public. Like, that's what I would want to do. Like, if I was very keen on the fact that I didn't do these things, then I would want to come out publicly, especially with his notoriety. And if you're a fan of sports, he's pretty much a household name.
And he's a very public person. Other than this, he's a very well-liked public person.
Yeah. But he comes out on social media. I saw it on Instagram when it came out. He says, "As a result of a social media post by a publicity-seeking plaintiff's lawyer, I recently became aware of a lawsuit that has apparently been filed against me. I have not yet seen the complaint, but I know this: I've never treated any woman with anything other than the utmost respect." The plaintiff's lawyer claims this isn't about money, but before filing the suit, he made a baseless six-figure settlement demand, which I quickly rejected. Unlike him, this isn't about money for me. It's about clearing my name, and I look forward to doing that. So, at the time with the 3 individual civil suits, like I said, I would have preferred for this to be in person, but at the time, this was like a very believable response, and this is what you would want to see from somebody like him. He's coming out, he's denying, he's saying that he wants to clear his name. Those are all very good signs. But as always, the NFL, they're kind of obligated with something of this nature to start an investigation, and they do so. Their special counsel for investigations, Lisa Friel, comes out with this statement. She says, "I become aware of the lawsuits you filed." This is in response to Busby. So, "I became aware of the lawsuits you filed on March 17th, as well as the one you filed this morning," referring to the third lawsuit. I guess it was the 17th, 18th, which you contain various allegations of misconduct by Houston Texans player Deshaun Watson. "I am writing to let you know that the league has opened an investigation into these allegations and to request the cooperation of your clients in our investigation. Such cooperation would begin with engaging in Zoom interviews with myself and another league investigator, at which, of course, you would be present. Please let me know at your earliest convenience if your clients are willing to assist us with our investigation of their allegations." Very standard response from the NFL, doing their due diligence. But then following that, this is when things really begin to snowball. Between that day, the 18th, up to the 22nd, 11 total suits or additional suits are filed. So at this point, we have 14 total, and things are starting to get a little bit more alarming. A week later, the new Texans GM, Nick Caserio, speaks on the Texans team podcast in response to everything. He says, "We certainly take the allegations, very seriously. The allegations, what's been discussed, are certainly troubling. Organizationally, that's not something we can condone, those types of actions. We'll let the legal process take care of itself." So very similar, even with the amount of cases that are coming out. Very similar to the statement that ownership gave out, just kind of like taking care of the team rather than like the bigger
Not defending
picture.
Deshaun Watson
Yeah.
and not defending Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
That was another key uh, thing people put up from that one.
Yeah, like they didn't have his back. It was nothing about like, oh, we know him, he wouldn't do this kind of thing. It was just like saving the team's ass and not caring, maybe not caring, but definitely did not defend Watson in either of the statements that they've given to this point.
They have a strong from upper management, a strong, clear message, and that is that they want to wait for the legal process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before they make any decisions, because keep in mind they're still like this, teeter totter of are they going to trade him or are they not? They still want to keep him. So if they come out and say that, if they come out and take a side, then that impacts that situation as well. So this is March 31st. Several therapists, I think the number was 18, wasn't it? 18 therapists.
Mm-hmm.
They came out and defended Watson, and they claimed that he, quote, behaved professionally. And this kind of gets fleshed out a little bit more later. But at this point, we just know that he has X amount defending, X amount, against him. And actually, to go along with this, this is a statement from a Houston doctor that worked with and massaged Deshaun Watson. She said, I worked with Deshaun several times in 2019 and 2020. He was very quiet during our sessions and often played his music and zoned out. Like most athletes, he requested that I focus on his hamstrings, abs, and adductors. We didn't go into the situation or into each case, but I think in large majority of the cases, that's where he requested initially to be massaged. So that's a big thing to understand, that like that's consistent throughout all the cases, either good or bad, that he wanted his abs.
There's a pattern.
Yeah, his lower abs, his groin, hamstrings, like around the groin area massaged. And then she finishes with, he never made me uncomfortable and always was professional during our sessions. So then, around this same time, Busby pointed out that a son of Watson's lawyer works for the Houston Police Department, which I thought this was interesting. Busby says, my legal opponent, Mr. Harden, has a son who is on the exclusive command staff of the Houston Police Department. I'm not saying in any way that Deshaun Watson's lawyer, Mr. Harden, has a son who has a position that would compromise the Houston Police Department and its investigation. I support his service along with all the Houston police officers.
I think it's worth noting that throughout all of this, the attorney representing the women, Anthony Busby, is posting on social media updates of the case. He's generally being, I don't want to say aggressive, but assertive in his communications. So I feel like this is another thing that plays into that.
Yeah, definitely.
He's being very aggressive.
Yeah, very, very aggressive. So then by the time 5 days ago, April 5th, we're at a point where there's 22 civil suits filed. And now, what was it, 2 or 3 of them have come forward and identified themselves. The Houston Police Department has opened up a criminal investigation. A lot's happened since, he signs his contract until now. The situation is just snowballed. It's gotten seemingly worse and worse. There's 2 ways to look at it, really. As of right now, none of this can be proven true. I'm sure both legal teams are working on that. But from what we can, take from this public information is either Deshaun Watson is a serial sexual predator, or this is like a huge case of defamation and ruining his character. This is a guy with a lot to lose. He's a celebrity of sorts, with people that idolize him and respect him and look up to him. And for this,
very charitable person.
Yeah. Both from he's a community-based guy. Like a lot of these guys, a lot of professional athletes give back to the communities that they're a part of, and especially him. I think he's donated money when Houston was hit by the hurricane, like all that sort of stuff. So for this to come out and potentially just ruin his character and it turn out to not be true, it's crazy. There's a lot to unpack. So where would you like to start?
Yeah, it's a good thing. I feel like we should definitely dive back into the process in which this all started, and that is where Deshaun feels as if he is slighted by the team and by the ownership. Basically, there was a lot of talk that Deshaun was going to have a decent say in who they're going to hire as the general manager and even as the head coach. There was a lot of things and a lot of names being thrown around, and one that's consistently thrown around is Jack Easterby, and he's thrown around as like this right hand man to the owner, but also he does not have like a GM title or anything of the such. Um, and eventually, basically, the executives and upper management win out over Deshaun Watson. There, they get their choice. They get their guy in Caserio. They signed Caserio to a ridiculous $32 million deal, I think, right?
Yeah.
So there's they just went and they paid Deshaun Watson 155 million. They say you're our franchise, and then 6 months later they go back and they basically say you're our franchise. Help us make this decision, but actually we don't really want your input on this decision.
Which is, yeah, it's crazy, especially because, as it stands, he's a top 5 quarterback, arguably better, top 3 in the NFL, and guys like that tend to get a say. Tom Brady gets to build whatever team he wants at this point. Same with Mahomes. Mahomes has say, like him and Andy Reid probably connect on those types of situations. So why not Deshaun Watson? And I'm sure he got the impression that like I'm going to be able to help and have a say with the moves that the organization makes. And that's, the same deal with Russell Wilson, although Russell Wilson doesn't have these allegations. So this, if this turns out to be true, it seems like, I don't think it can be ignored the proximity in which Watson and Coley disagree. It's kind of made clear that nobody's going to budge. And then the release of these allegations. If this turns out to be something more than just a coincidence and this whole situation is just, untrue, there's a serious case that can be made that Houston could be involved with this, and this was them trying to disempower Watson and make him untradeable. Because, as sports fans, you're kind of aware that this was one of the biggest quarterback markets, like lots of teams needed new quarterbacks and lots of teams were in the market and willing to give up assets for a new quarterback. The Colts trade for Carson Wentz, maybe not the same value as, definitely not the same value as Deshaun Watson, but the Colts were open to get a quarterback. The Bears were open, Panthers.
We can add the timing of the Rams trade for Stafford, in which they get they trade 3 first-round picks and their quarterback during basically this January-ish kind of, when all this Deshaun Watson things are unraveling.
Yeah.
So,
and that's important to note because I wrote an article talking about how that would impact the quarterback trade market. And, that kind of set the standard. Like, if you're going to give up 3 firsts for Stafford to make you a contender, that's debatable to some people. But it's beside the point. That just kind of set the market value on a guy like Watson. Like, you're going to have to at least give up 3 firsts for him. And
then you hear the Bears, and the rumors are the 3 first rounds for Russell and a player, and it's like, okay,
2 starters.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and then we see just a week or two ago, San Francisco trades up to the 3rd overall pick, and they give up several first-round picks. So I mean, it's obvious. It's obvious that teams were willing to make the deal, but Houston, for whatever reason, whether it was just the fact that they truly didn't believe that there was a market, or they just wanted him that badly, I don't know.
That's where the whole that's where the whole theory that Houston is involved in these allegations, that's where it falls apart to me. Because why would you basically take this guy who's worth way more than Matt Stafford was, and you blow up his value by these allegations? That's where the only part where I'm considering, like, okay, you're there's no way Deshaun Watson is coming back in the same attitude. Why would you try to keep him on your team at that cap hit? And just go and get the assets that you can get for him. And you messed up.
Yeah.
We've seen it all. I mean, you saw with the Eagles and Wentz. They messed up with Wentz. It happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also kind of important to note the fact that Houston ownership has come out and said some bizarre things about how they, their relationship with players to begin with. Part of why Hopkins wanted out was because of the way that ownership treated them. And he was the one that came out and said something about this. He referred to the NFL players as, like slaves or prisoners, right? That was him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was McNair. McNair passed away, but that was
Right.
the owner. McNair was the one who said that he made a metaphor that it's like the prisoners running the prison or whatever to the fact that players are getting more rights in the NFL. That was kind of his comment.
And so, I mean, that mentality, it's not hard to believe that mentality is still, at least in the Houston organization.
I was going to say it's also the city of Houston, which, I mean,
Yeah.
it's Texas still. Everything is bigger in Texas, even there.
A much more conservative mindset for sure.
Yes.
So it's not, I think that has a part to do with it. Like a black, wealthy man, a black, wealthy, successful man wanting power in this very white dominated ownership, like throughout the NFL.
Oh yeah.
There's still definitely this feeling that owners in the NFL feel like they should be able to do, say, behave however they want, especially just in comparison to the NBA. They're much more conservative on politics, the whole standing versus kneeling for the anthem. That's a whole different situation, but that should just speak to the mindset that a lot of owners have around the NFL, especially Houston, like with what McNair said, although he's not in power right now. Like I said, I don't think it's hard to believe that that's still the mindset, at least within Houston. So, they give Watson this false promise of power to try and disempower him. And then when he tries to speak up and he's like, I'm seriously not coming back, I don't want to play, then these allegations come out. If they turn out to be true, it's kind of hard to overlook all of that,
The timing for a conspiracy theorist is way too good.
Yeah.
It's like A equals B there. You know what I mean? Like, to any rational conspiracy theorist, that one's like, oh, I mean, the Texans are setting him up. But I mean, I think it's way deeper than that when you get his contract involved, and you see that he's got that no trade clause, and he's got all his guaranteed money due to him soon, and it's like, if this is the Texans' play, they're really shooting themselves directly in the foot. Because what's his value now?
Exactly. Even if this turns out to be true, nobody's gonna want to I don't know. It hurts them no matter what at this point, if that's the case.
Yeah.
But then again, Houston's done a lot of questionable things. The DeAndre Hopkins trade was horrible. It was horrible, and Bill O'Brien has ruined that team.
Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah.
Trading for an offensive tackle.
Yeah.
2 first-round picks.
Yeah. They've done a lot of questionable things, to say the least, and
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's going back, but to the fact that Bill O'Brien was essentially head coach, GM, the czar of the team, I mean, that can speak to the upper management dysfunction that they have there.
Mhm.
The guy who doesn't have a job really anywhere in the NFL right now,
Yeah.
he was running like everything for them. So it's not a well-run organization.
No. So, I mean, I think it's just worth noting that they have this ownership running the slaves mentality, or running the prisoners mentality. They don't want players to have power. They've made some very questionable, terrible moves in the past. The team is just a mess in general, and this could be their way of trying to one, send a message that they don't want players to have power, and two, they own the team. They're running the show, they don't want to give up that feeling of power. But on the other hand, if this is all true, then that just wipes all that stuff away. And this just brings up serious issues for Watson. If this is true, he's a serial sexual predator, and that's just not okay. Not okay in general. It's definitely not okay for a person of his, of his status. We've seen this happen in the past in the NFL, though, and I'm afraid, like, even if it's true, like, with Michael Vick, he did some really horrible things and served his time in prison, and then, despite on how you feel about like them going to prison, learning from their mistakes and coming out and being reformed, like, this is just not okay. And the NFL, this is an opportunity for the NFL, or assuming that this comes out to be true, this is an opportunity for them to like put their foot down and be like, we're not going to allow this type of behavior. Like, even like he should be banned from the NFL. This is a legitimate case. Like,
Well, he should be on the as of right now, he should be on the commissioner's exempt list. He
oh
should be
yeah,
getting paid while they investigate what's going on. But they didn't even entertain that yet.
no,
And I think if this is all true, as we're under this whole, we're under that pretense right now that this is all true and Deshaun Watson's a predator, then we're going to be reading about in public relations textbooks or whatever from years from now about how the NFL was okay with a sexual predator being amidst their league for 4 months after whatever it's April, 2 months after he was alleged to have been a sexual predator. They were putting their head in the sand on it.
yeah. As soon as these allegations, not as soon, but like the NFL's been investigating this since the beginning, like days after the reports. So they got to know something, right? Like, they got to know something. And the fact that he has no repercussions as of right now. He's just like another guy on the
Yeah.
team. Like,
Other than if you count the fact that Nike and Beats by Dre pulled their endorsement. But that is, from the NFL standpoint, he has received no punishment from his employer.
yeah. And
I don't know about you, but I don't think in any job can you go out and have 22 allegations for sexual misconduct and show up on Monday morning and be okay and not have
yeah, exactly. Like, he would be fired anywhere else. Even in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, we just saw it with Myers Leonard. I mean,
that was something much more minuscule
Exactly, yeah.
than 22 women being assaulted.
Yeah, definitely not okay what happened with that situation, but immediately there were repercussions. He was cut from the team. All of his endorsement deals were lost, and he's out of the league now. He's not going to play in the NBA ever again.
No.
But
And I mean,
it's also,
it is to mention there that it was Myers Leonard. It wasn't Russell Westbrook or a star. And this is Deshaun Watson, like you said, he's at the top 3 quarterback in the league. And
but should that make a difference? It shouldn't. I don't think it should make a difference.
I don't think it should. I don't think it should either. But I am putting that into context there. That
Right.
Myers Leonard was an expendable man at that point.
Yeah, and you could also make the fact that if LeBron James came out and said what Myers Leonard said, would he be dropped from the team and dropped from the league? I don't know. He should be, but I don't know.
I don't know. I would argue in today's day and age, you really should be, because if you're willing to say that, if you're willing to do those certain things in public, then it's a problem.
I mean, not that LeBron would ever do that. Just that's the example. Like,
Correct.
You take the best of the best from the league. If they make a mistake, they're definitely treated differently than if someone of lower status makes that mistake.
Correct. Yeah, it's seniority and and severity. I mean, what Myers Leonard said was horrific, but what Deshaun Watson's severity is much more severe.
For
That's
sure.
why it's very questionable why even the team is kind of like, we're waiting on the legal process. Like, if you're the team, I personally don't think I could stand by a guy who has 22 sexual misconduct charge or allegations.
And here's the thing, and this is what we discussed on the podcast last week. We didn't go into much detail about the thing. We just discussed, more of the sports ethics side of it. And for something like this is a very large scale case at this point, especially. There's 22, civil cases potentially turning criminal. Either way, this is going to take a long time to develop, like at least a year, probably, something like that. I'm no expert in like law studies or anything, but I know this sort of stuff takes time. Come week 1, are you starting Deshaun Watson if like he's not on the exempt list? I think Houston's going to do it. The fact
that is that is where the league is, but that's where the NFL is not stepping in, and they're not going to prevent Houston from doing that. Like, that's
a
the
problem.
issue.
That tells you that they're okay with that behavior. They're enabling that behavior. If it comes out to be true, if it comes out to be not true, that's still a huge gamble that they took. Like this is a PR disaster if they let him play and then he's guilty.
Right now, they're basically they threw it all in and they're waiting for the river to turn up. Right I mean, if this is a gamble for the NFL. I mean, they're gambling that Deshaun Watson's character is stronger and that his celebrity is stronger than these allegations at this
Mhm.
point.
Right.
Because why else wouldn't you throw him on the exempt list and suspend him into the sun?
Yeah. I mean, and it just goes to show you again the ownership of, you know, the mentality of ownership in the NFL and the mismanagement as well. Roger Goodell does not respond to these
Mhm.
situations well. Um, like for example,
No.
like we talk about all the time, Josh Gordon's career. I mean, he might have had mental issues, but he was essentially exempt from the league for smoking pot. Like,
And substance abuse, other stuff. Yeah. So I mean, but you're telling me that it's okay to have 22 open pending civil investigations.
right, like that. These are just the things that the league values and
Mhm.
looks or overlooks. They didn't
And then
have. Go ahead.
there's sorry that there's the I think his name was Chad Wheeler from the Seahawks,
Mhm.
who beat his significant other to the point of death, near death. And the Seahawks, because he's like a fifth rounder or whatever, they just cut him immediately, and the NFL didn't have to do anything about it. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's interesting the publicity side of things.
They try and
It's
sweep things under the rug more than they try and confront issues.
correct,
Yeah, and that's a
correct.
problem.
Unless it's unsweepable, unless they can't sweep it under the rug, unless they're trying to throw a rug on a dead body, they literally
Cough,
will try
cough,
to
Ray
sweep it under
Rice.
the
Cough,
rug.
cough, Michael Vick.
That is exactly what it was. I mean, if there was no video of the Ray Rice thing to the public, would we have found out that Ray Rice beat his girlfriend in public in an elevator?
Yeah,
I
and
just,
social media has really helped evolved, you know, this kind of news reporting, and
Mhm.
the NFL still just they still respond the same way. Like nothing. It seems like
Mhm.
nothing's changed for them unless they absolutely have to confront the issue. They'll find any other way to, you know, avoid it. And I think one of the biggest examples of that is, you know, Colin Kaepernick and the fact that he was essentially he was never like there was no outright ban of him from the league, but it was kind of it seems like this sort of pact that the owners have where they're like, this guy is protesting what we believe in, we're not going to give him a job anymore. You know,
Well,
like
he won his collusion case. They
yeah,
ruled, the judge ruled that they colluded to keep him out of the league.
mm-hmm.
And I mean,
That's
I'm sure the
just
NFL, I'm sure the NFL was okay with paying Colin Kaepernick whatever it was to get him off the field.
yeah, because I mean, not only is that how they believe and how the owners think, like very conservatively and my way or the highway, like they want complete
Mhm.
control of the league. That and they know that a lot of the NFL fans also think that way. Um, we can't obviously speak for everybody, but I think
Mhm.
it's safe to assume that a large majority of people following these teams, based on the reaction that I saw on social media and like in the news and everything, like people didn't like Colin Kaepernick for what he did, uh, and that has to play a part in into why he's not in the league anymore.
Which is amazing when you consider what happened in 2020, where
Right?
it's, you know, it's like, okay, well, we all owe him a big apology because he was,
Yeah.
you know, he might have seemed, you know, self-righteous and like he was acting for maybe some self-interest there, but his statement was
Ahead of his
pretty,
time now.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, you constantly see the NFL sweeping these types of things under the rug when they can.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, exactly what we're seeing here. They're being on the hush about this, and that's no. There's a reason why Roger Goodell has not opened and uttered a word about this. It's
Oh
because
yeah.
if he did, that's CNN worthy news.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like worldwide news right there.
It's inexcusable that he hasn't said anything. It's ridiculous. There's no
Like,
you can't be the commissioner of a high profile organization and just completely ignore this. I guess it's a world headline at this point. Like not even just national. It's more nationally focused, but like this is a big
mhm.
deal, and Goodell has said nothing. He's said nothing from what I've seen.
It is a current top 10 in his position or whatever we want to say at in his sport being basically alleged of doing some very serial, like we would see a documentary on Netflix about stuff.
Oh yeah, this will
Like,
be a documentary in like 10
yeah,
years. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying though, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like this is some graphic, crazy, like this you couldn't, like we were talking about, like if this is made up, this is someone took like the best creative writing course that I've
Yeah, because the details of
heard
these
of.
cases, we didn't go over them, but they're pretty brutal.
Yes.
Maybe not. I wouldn't say brutal, but it's very concerning and like disturbing and creepy more than like brutal. He didn't like, from what we know, he's not like beating people or like physically harming them, but it's more
Yeah, there's
mentally
no. It's not a
damaging.
physical. Yeah, it's not like a physical sexual assault. It's much more of like, an acquaintance sexual assault because he knows these people. And I think what makes this leaning towards in my opinion, personally speaking, to the guilty side is the fact that he's using these social media apps like Instagram and Snapchat,
Yeah.
because those are types of things that predators would use in order to cover their tracks in, or just make this seem natural to their victim.
Yeah. Like he comes across as a friend or like,
Exactly.
something more friendly and personable, but really what he just wants is sex. And then he like from what I've read, ESPN let out a whole like list of the cases and went through details from what they know. And in a lot of these cases, he's like taking off the massage or like the cover towel, and he's like
Hmm.
showing his penis, and he's trying to get the therapist to touch it, and he's like leaning towards them, trying to put it on their hands. It's just creepy stuff, like stuff he should not be
Everything
doing.
everything about it is that of a sexual predator. That's why we
Mhm.
called it a predator, because I mean, it's not like he's like, it's not like these are 22 instances where he's like exposing himself or something. There's some coercive, it might not be like physical, like tie him down, beat him up type stuff, but there's some not good physical coercion here.
Yeah, and he's and predator because he's seeking these people out, like specifically
Correct.
DMing these. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that's also a problem. He's seeking out these women, uh, and
And
wants these sexual favors.
oh
You know.
yeah, and then as we mentioned, there's a pattern, and
Mhm.
that's why it becomes like he's a predator, because he has like I hate to say it, like a strategy for how he's going to court these
An
women
MO,
to
yeah.
do what he wants them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got an MO. It's like a serial killer, like he has this distinct thing he has to do in order to get to where his means to an end.
Hmm. I mean that, and then towards the end, or like not towards the end, but like some of these later cases, because the first case allegedly occurred, I think it was April of last year of 2020,
Hmm.
and they've just progressively gotten worse. It starts with just the DMing, and then him like trying to get them to touch his penis and stuff. But then it's like it progressively gets worse. Like the behavior becomes more aggressive. There's times where he's
Hmm.
threatened to ruin their careers if they didn't do what he wanted. He tried to get some of them to sign NDAs. He tried to pay them money to sign the NDAs. Um, there's some really concerning behaviors. Like he's trying to cover his ass somehow. Like he's realizing he's not being careful and he's trying to be more careful about it. So
Like he's
he's
realizing that this might all add up into him behind bars.
right, and it tells me that one, it's not like a mental health issue. Obviously, there's something he's disturbed somehow, but he's very aware of what he's doing is not okay, and he's trying to
Correct.
cover his ass. It's not
I
like
don't.
he thinks everything's fine. He
Mhm.
knows he's not supposed to be doing shit like this, and yet he's doing it anyway. And some of these cases are as recent as March when the cases were filed. Like he was allegedly still committing these actions, and what that tells me, if this is all true, is that he has an issue with power. Like he needs to feel like he's in power. Maybe when, the ownership takes away his power in the organization, he has to lash out somewhere else and he has to go get a massage, like
I think there's no doubt that this whole thing has to do with power. Just when we go through the details of this, and when you hear the fact that like he is refusing to use a towel, and then when he flips over from having the massage, he's like already ready to go, so to speak, for this act that he's going to do to this
yeah.
woman. And meanwhile, the woman is literally just giving him a massage from all of the details that the women have you know kind of explained, that they're there for a massage. There's nothing there. They aren't giving off vibes that they want something from him other than a massage.
And he
And
doesn't do so until they're in the
until he
situation.
does.
Yeah.
Yes, until he does. Until he exposes himself, or he coerces them to do something to him.
And it's like the fact that he doesn't allude to this beforehand, like that gives the masseuse the, the impression that it's going to be professional and whatever. But then he kind of uses his fame, money, whatever, to his advantage and tries to be like, well, it's like he thinks like, oh, I'm Deshaun Watson. These women will do anything for me if this is true. So
Right.
he just has this. I mean, for somebody like him who's been in the spotlight at least since he was at Clemson, probably before then, like he's just always been the guy, you know. And this that some people can't handle power like that, and we've seen it, in other people, in other cases, especially athletes. Tyreek Hill, Ray Rice, like these people that lash out and think that they can do whatever they want because they're famous, have money, what have you. Some people just can't handle that level of power and fame. It gets to their head, and this could be the case with Deshaun Watson, or there's probably a lot that goes into it, but it's hard to deny that he has this, power trip about him. Like he feels like he's owed a certain level of respect and power.
And kind of playing devil's advocate here, if this is all false, we're talking about a guy who he's since his time at Clemson, he's been known to go back to his community where he's from, and he's invested money in there, and he's invested time and effort and resources into rebuilding where he's from, into helping the kids from where he's from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you mentioned, he helped during Hurricane Harvey. He's helped I know during a lot of Houston schools, he's helped for like supplies and resources and stuff. He's a charitable man. So if this is all false, which it's beginning to be hard to believe, and at least in my opinion,
Yeah, same here.
this is just it's a massacre of this guy's character.
Yeah, like
And it would be the hugest defamation lawsuit maybe that we've seen in our lifetime if it's
for
true,
sure.
if it's false.
And like we mentioned it earlier. Like if it's false, it's also possible that Houston itself, like the organization, Texans organization, could have something to do with it. There's no way of proving that as of right now, but it just seems very odd, the timing of everything. The fact that makes him untradeable in a free agency period where a lot of teams were looking for quarterbacks, and there were situations where a lot of assets were given out to potentially get a new quarterback or just get upfront a new quarterback. So
And overall, knowing that the Houston Texans stance has been since day one that they would love him on the team and they just want to keep him on the team.
yeah, and if that's the case, that's not good. The fact that they would do all this just to keep the guy on the team, holy shit.
If that is true, then it is some manipulation, some real hardcore manipulation.
Yeah, and if
With this guy's life.
there's got to be a way for the NFL or somebody to prove if this is false, that the Texans had something to do with it, if they did in fact have something to do with it, because that's a problem, and I think that they're probably not the only one doing stuff like that. Like I'm sure there's more minuscule things all across the league where if some guy wants out, they want to keep him. Like maybe they blackmail him. Like maybe they told Watson, like we know we can release this about you, but I don't know.
I mean, just to put something more minor in perspective, I mean, I remember when the Eagles and Wentz were going through their breakup, and there was definitely some leaked reports and rumors from the Eagles front office in which that's painted Carson Wentz as this, egotistical maniac guy. Which I mean, I think it's pretty obvious he's not very egotistical. He's a little bit far from that. He might be stubborn, but yeah. I think there's definitely narrative painted by teams in order to get what they want from their fan base, which, I mean, if Houston didn't want to keep Deshaun, wouldn't it make sense to be like, well, no, we didn't mess this up. The dude's a sexual predator. We didn't mess up Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's messed up himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think the same thing happened to Sam Darnold. Like, there's this narrative painted that he sucks and that he can't play in the NFL, just so that just so Jets fans were like, yeah, you know what? You're right. We can get this new shiny quarterback at the second pick, and it'll be fun and exciting. When really, I mean, in my opinion, he can play. But like that's just an example of teams painting the narrative, like you said, to get what they want, and just to maintain power. That's what it comes down to, is maintaining power. And this,
I mean, there's there's the narratives around Rodgers too. I mean, about how
Right.
he doesn't really like to win. He doesn't love his teammates. He doesn't this and that. It's like, okay,
The guy who just won
we'll guess
MVP.
we'll believe that.
Right. He's one of the best
Yeah.
arm talents
Yeah.
in league history. It's just
And,
this thing painted by the
meanwhile, the
media.
team behind the scenes, the team is doing everything they can to like separate themselves from Rodgers, drafting younger quarterbacks, drafting younger running backs, drafting this and that and the other thing. That's not what he needs.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're definitely not setting him up to win at all. Even
Yeah.
though the guy just won MVP, took them very close to a Super Bowl appearance.
And then they paint a narrative like, oh, he's just kind of egotistical. He doesn't really want to win for us. He'll go play anywhere for whatever amount of money. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, and you see him in like media outlets like the Pat McAfee show that we both watch. Like he's he's all cool and calm about everything. He's there's no denying that he's, I don't know. I guess we're not in those locker rooms, but
I was gonna say, it's gonna be hard to find a guy in the Packers locker room who would probably have a problem with Aaron Rodgers at this
Right.
point in his career.
And I think this all goes back to this idea that we talked about where ownership all across the league, not just in Houston or Green Bay, whatever, they're very hesitant to give up power. And they'll make hires they'll draft people and they'll make hires at coach, GM, everywhere, prioritizing power. And like, for example, Jeffrey Lurie is the big example of that right now because the Eagles are kind of a mess, and everyone blames that on Howie Roseman and his inability to draft. And just like, there's this rumor coming out that he's not fired yet because he allows Lurie to have say in draft picks and who gets traded.
That's exactly. I mean, I believe that, and I believe a lot of general managers are in the position they're in. Like, why does Ryan Pace have a job at this point of his career in Chicago? Like, there's a lot of general managers when you look around the league and you wonder, what do they know or who do they know that keeps them in position of power? And like you said, it's all about the owner having power, and you see it with Jerry Jones. He's the extreme, and then you see it with guys like Robert Kraft, where it's lesser of extreme. But I don't make no doubt about it, Robert Kraft has a say in everyone that walks through that door. He signed off on Cam Newton coming there.
Oh yeah, sure.
So
but yeah, I mean, I think
there's levels.
Yeah, there's a lot of levels to it, and this whole situation, if it turns out to be false, it's definitely a narrative that has to be it has to be accounted for. That NFL ownership has this pattern of seeking power and painting things the way that they want it to maintain that, and to make it yeah, they'll make it known they want to send a message one way or another that they're in power and that the players can't have the power. Especially because of what you see in the NBA, the players have almost all the power anymore.
I'll pose this question: when's the last time in the NFL a guy, especially a quarterback, has asked for a trade and then actually sat out when they weren't given the trade?
Yeah,
I can tell you, I know the one. It's Carson Palmer, and he literally retired. And it's Carson Palmer. Do we really,
Yeah,
it's not exactly like he wasn't the best of the best, but I mean,
he was a notable player. Yeah,
I don't see. Yeah. I just don't see a guy like Deshaun Watson where if push came to shove, they told him game one, you're still not traded. I think he still shows up if he's allowed to.
And yeah, I agree. And they'll paint that as, oh, he's just a competitor. He wants to be out there. He doesn't care about the shit going on. That's how it'll be played
he
out.
wants that game check too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't think of anybody. Oh, Zeke sat out 1 week or something, or no, he sat out half a season.
Was it?
He sat out a few weeks, but still.
I didn't remember that.
That's the only one though. No, it's very rare. Yeah. And if you do it, you're definitely like attacked by the media if you do that.
Oh, but Zeke didn't have a contract, did he? Or did he have? He was on a 1 year.
I think they tagged him, and he wouldn't play unless he got extended or something.
See, like Deshaun has a long-term deal. I don't know of anybody on a long-term deal who was requested a trade who then didn't get the trade, who then said like, I'm not showing up.
Yeah.
even though if I show up, I get X amount of dollars, and all I have to do is show up for that money. It doesn't say I have to play good.
Yeah. Exactly. It just doesn't happen.
No, it's much more likely in the NBA that would happen because the players have power in the NBA.
Yeah. Like, and especially you see that a lot with guys who sign. Like LeBron is totally in control of his career. He signs those 1 year player option deals, and if he wants to stay, he stays. If they don't win, he can go somewhere else. You know, like he can do
And
whatever he wants.
what are you gonna tell LeBron James? You don't want his services for 1 year?
Yeah, like when he was a free agent before he signed with LA, everybody wanted him. Everybody
Yeah.
wanted him.
So it's a joke.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, especially because NBA. I think it's notable to think about the impact that an individual could have on an NBA roster rather than NFL. But then again, we're talking about quarterbacks who a lot of people. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say is the most important position, at least on offense, to have filled.
And, and we can also argue there's only 3 teams that wouldn't want Deshaun Watson's services. Maybe 4.
Right. Yeah. So
He's not afraid in most cases.
yeah, it's he could essentially go wherever he wanted, but this whole situation limits that whether it's true or false. You know, like whether it's if it's true, he just shouldn't have a job in general. But if it's false, he's at least stuck there for another year, at least.
And if it's false, I guarantee you there are teams and ownerships who will not take him on because of the allegations that were surrounding him.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly, for
Unless
sure.
it's totally found out this was defamation. You know.
Yeah, I mean, even then, they probably will want a chance because, you know, what if I don't know if you can prove defamation, but you can prove that those 22 cases were false. Like they weren't. Like there's ways to work around it where even if he did do it, you can still, you know.
He can be found not guilty.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Just because of who he is.
Settle,
Like,
or he could settle out of court with a lot of these women, and we wouldn't really hear about that if that was part of the
It would
agreement
just-
to settle out of court.
it would just fizzle out. Yep. But teams would know, and they wouldn't. You know, they wouldn't want it. They wouldn't want to be involved in that.
I guarantee you, the Houston Texans, the NFL, and the Rusty Hardin, the attorney for Deshaun Watson, know a lot more than anything is being let out.
Oh,
And
for
even
sure.
maybe Anthony Busby, the attorney for the 22 accused or accuser.
Especially now because at first it was like, oh, this isn't a thing, and now it's slowly being leaked out that, oh, okay, it kind of is a thing because some of them were
feels
consensual.
We're getting details every day, like even the details that you and I were mentioning about the types of massages he was asking for. Those details weren't available to us even
In the beginning,
know.
yeah. It's slowly leaked out. Like they're trying to hold on to as much as they can before, you know, eventually something has to break. Whether that's for good or for bad. But it's definitely looking more towards the bad. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I said it to you. I mean, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. 22 accusations is a ton.
Yeah, and
to fight off.
that's the big debate is because this has become a thing where there's a lot of, you know, women who cry rape is what people say, because they want money or whatever. I don't think it should be seen as that. Whether that's the case or not, you know, like that shouldn't be the stereotype on a situation like this. It should be taken very seriously until one side is proven, you know, until we have some sort of outcome. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh well, Watson isn't proved guilty yet, so I don't give a shit. Like that's not how it should be.
So he's not guilty, so therefore he's fine. He's innocent.
Yeah, like if I'm the head coach of the Texans right now, and it's and he's still like this is going on, still no proof of guilt or innocence. Like he's not playing for me right now. Like no. There's just no way. There's no way he plays for me. I don't care how good he is.
Camp or whatever in a month or two.
You don't want that in the locker room. Like you just don't.
Not even to mention the fact that he's, you know, that's a bad character flaw, but also mentioned he might not even be there if the investigation comes out and that he's guilty. Because I mean, they'll just yank him off. They'll throw him in prison. I mean, he won't be there anymore.
Exactly.
If you're planning on him being your quarterback, it's like okay.
And
you're also gambling that the court system is going to be in his favor.
Yeah, maybe that's what they're thinking. Like, if we can't have him, nobody can. You know, like shit. They're like, well, I'm not gonna trade him to some other team so he can be good. So fuck it, let's just tank for the first pick now. Because that roster is just not put. There's nobody on that roster anymore. Like they weren't even that great with Hopkins and JJ Watt with him with Watson at quarterback. and Fuller. Now all those guys are gone. Like, who's the best player on that roster? I bet you
David Johnson?
yeah. I bet you the average fan couldn't name more than like 10 players on that roster. There's no way. I don't even think I
I
could.
don't. I was gonna say I don't think I can name 10
Yeah.
players on that
Except for
roster.
the like 4 aging running backs that they signed. That's about it.
I
Like,
can name you probably those guys. I mean, yeah,
just not a good roster. It's not.
no, because it's not a good organization, and
Yeah, it's not. I'm surprised JJ Watt was there as long as he was.
yeah, he's yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that just about summarizes, the whole situation as a whole, and then all the possible outcomes of, the situation. It's something that should be taken very seriously. I think the main things you can get out of this are the investigation is serious, the stakes are high for everybody involved. The NFL has not handled it the way that you would want them to handle it. Goodell hasn't said anything. They've given out very brief statements coming from their personal investigative lawyer. Like that nobody of notable status outside of her has come out and said anything in terms of the NFL stance. The Texans have been very vague about things. It's just not being handled well. The Texans or the NFL at all. Watson is either a serial predator or there's some very serious power, defamation, painting of narratives, storyline going on in the NFL, at least with the Texans. I think this could be one of the most impactful, influential cases, events in sports history, like at least in recent memory. Like to me, this is almost as big as like the OJ situation, and it can have a lot of repercussions following, based on the truth that comes out.
I think this could be potentially very damaging to the National Football League as a whole.
I think it already has been, just because of the way people are seeing the NFL and how they're reacting. It's very comparable to what just happened with the NCAA and their very sexist treatment of March Madness tournament. They very heavily favor the men and their success because that's what makes them the money, and that's what they put more money into. And they were attacked for that, and thankfully they righted their wrongs there. But the NFL just hasn't done anything.
And this is the NFL doing what the NFL always does in situations like this. They drop the ball, they intentionally kick the can down the road,
Yep.
throw it under the rug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so NFL needs to do, some better. They need to manage the situation a little better. And obviously, again, just to reiterate, like a lot of the stuff that we were talking about is, purely hypothetical and just what ifs. We laid out some information that's available to the public. You just Google the situation, you can find out as much of this information as we have. And obviously, nobody has been found guilty or proven innocent at all.
And Deshaun Watson has not been charged criminally.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, exactly. We're not here to make any accusations, but I think it's important to dive into the what ifs, break down the situation, lay it out, and just help people understand like how this can impact.
What we do know.
Yeah, that too. So, yeah, I thought it's been a very informative and I like the discussion. I think it's something that people need to talk about, and they're afraid to because of how serious it is. But yeah, I thought it was good.
No, I agree. I think it's something that whether you're a casual fan or a diehard fan of the NFL, it is something that needs to be talked about, discussed, addressed, and frankly made more important, just because until we as a society make it more important, why does the NFL care?